My name is Margaret Johnson and I am 78 years old. I've lived in the same small town in Ohio for almost my entire life. I spent decades building a life with my late husband, raising our only son David, and putting my heart into making our home a place where love was louder than any hardship. When David married Claire, I welcomed her like my own daughter. I thought she would continue that warmth. But I was wrong. The most shocking moment of my life came one rainy afternoon when I overheard Claire on the phone, her voice dripping with disdain. She didn't know I was in the hallway, standing just outside the kitchen door. I had only come down to make myself a cup of tea. My hands were trembling as I heard her say, "Why do we have to keep her around? She's too old to matter anymore. The house, the money. All of it should be ours by now. She's just in the way." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to my chest. Too old to matter. My knees nearly gave out, and I had to hold on to the wall just to steady myself. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might burst. Claire's laughter echoed in my ears, cruel and cold. And then I heard something even worse. She said, "Don't worry, David. I'll make sure she signs the papers soon. She's frail. She'll believe anything." I felt my breath catch. Papers. What papers? I realized she was plotting something, and my own son was in on it. I felt tears stinging my eyes, but something else stirred inside me, a fire I thought had long gone out. They thought I was too old to matter, but they had no idea what I was capable of. I quietly stepped back to my room, my mind racing with fear and anger. I knew I had to act, but I didn't yet know how. That night, as the rain battered the windows, I sat on my bed and cried. But my tears were not just of pain, they were of determination. I began to think back to every little thing that had felt off lately. The sudden kindness from Claire, the way David avoided my eyes, the envelopes they wouldn't let me open. It all began to make sense. They were plotting against me, and I couldn't let them succeed. The next morning, I made myself breakfast as if nothing had happened. I watched Claire's every move, and she watched me too, with that fake smile plastered on her face. She thought she was clever. She thought I was too weak, too naive. But behind my calm eyes, I was hatching a plan. Days passed, and their whispers grew louder. I pretended not to notice. I let them believe I was oblivious. Meanwhile, I started digging. Old documents, bank statements, the will. I called an old friend, Richard, who had once been my husband's lawyer. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but when I explained my suspicions, his voice became sharp and serious. "Margaret, don't sign anything they give you. Not a single thing." His words gave me courage, but they also filled me with dread. What were David and Claire planning that even a lawyer would sound so alarmed? I knew I had to find out more. So I began to follow them, quietly observing. Claire made secret phone calls late at night. David signed things behind my back. They thought I wasn't watching, but I was. One evening, I caught Claire slipping an envelope into her purse. I followed her as quietly as my old legs would allow, and I saw her place it in the locked desk drawer in the study. My curiosity burned, but my heart pounded with fear. I needed to see what was in that envelope. I needed to know the truth before it was too late. That night, I waited until they both were asleep. My hands shook as I tiptoed into the study. The drawer was locked, but my late husband had taught me how to open it with a hairpin when we used to play little tricks on each other. With a trembling breath, I managed to open it. Inside was the envelope. My hands tore it open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a transfer document. One that would give them full control over my house and bank accounts. My signature was already forged. My knees went weak, and I gripped the desk to keep from falling. They had already set everything in motion. I was staring at the proof of their betrayal. But I also realized something else. This could be my weapon. I put the envelope back exactly how I found it and locked the drawer. My heart was pounding, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. They thought I was powerless, but they had just given me the key to destroy them. The next morning, Claire handed me a cup of tea, smiling sweetly. "Drink up, Margaret. You need your strength." My eyes met hers, and for the first time I smiled back, not out of kindness but because I knew something she didn't. I had a plan. And when it unfolded, it would leave her in tears. But before I could strike, something happened that night that changed everything. Something I didn't see coming at all. To be continued in the next chapter. If this story has already gripped your heart and you want to see how I turn the tables on them, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. I woke up the next morning with the same determination burning inside me. The house felt strangely quiet, except for the faint clinking of dishes coming from the kitchen. I could hear Claire humming to herself, cheerful, almost mocking. Every sound from her grated against my nerves, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to play along until the right moment. Over breakfast, Claire leaned over me with that fake sweetness again. "Margaret, you should really let us help you with the finances. It's too much for you at your age." Her voice dripped with honey, but her eyes had that glint, the kind that hides venom. I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. "You might be right, dear," I said softly. I could feel her satisfaction radiating like poison. Little did she know I had already called Richard that morning. I told him about the forged document I found, and he insisted we meet immediately. "Bring everything you can," he said. "Don't let them suspect anything." My heart pounded at the thought of sneaking those papers out, but I knew I had to do it. That night, as the house slept, I crept back into the study. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a thunderclap. My trembling hands retrieved the envelope. I tucked it into my sweater and slipped back into my room, locking the door behind me. For the first time in days, I felt a small sense of control. The next morning, I told Claire I was going for a short walk to clear my head. She didn't suspect a thing. Why would she? She thought I was just a harmless old woman. I met Richard at his office downtown. He looked at the papers and his face turned pale. "This is criminal, Margaret. They forged your signature. They're trying to steal everything from you." My hands clenched the armrest of the chair. "What can I do?" I asked. Richard leaned forward, his voice steady but urgent. "We'll need to act fast. I'll contact the authorities, but we need more evidence. Do you have anything else? Any recordings? Witnesses?" I shook my head, frustration rising in my chest. "Not yet," I said. "But I'll get them." When I returned home, Claire was waiting at the door. Her eyes narrowed. "Where did you go?" she asked, her tone sharp. I smiled weakly. "Just a walk, dear. Don't worry." She didn't believe me. I could tell by the way her jaw tightened. From that day on, she started watching me more closely. Over the next few days, I played my role perfectly. I acted frail, confused, even forgetful. They lowered their guard, thinking I was slipping away. But behind closed doors, I was setting up my own traps. I hid a small recorder in the living room where they often had their secret conversations. I placed another one under the kitchen table. And it worked. 2 nights later, as I pretended to sleep, I heard their voices downstairs. I pressed the recorder's remote from my pocket to start capturing everything. Claire's voice cut through the silence. "She's falling for it, David. Once she signs the new will, we'll be free of her." David's voice followed, uneasy. "I don't know, Claire. Maybe we're going too far." "Too far," she hissed. "She's lived her life. We deserve that house, that money. Don't you want a better future for us?" There was a long pause before David muttered, "Fine. But this has to be done soon." My heart ached hearing my own son's voice agree to betray me. But at the same time I felt stronger. I now had exactly what I needed, proof of their plot and the fire to see it through. The next day, I went to Richard again with the recordings. He listened, shaking his head in disbelief. "Margaret, this is solid. They won't see what's coming." His words filled me with a mixture of relief and anger. I was ready to strike back, but Richard advised me to wait. "We need to catch them in the act," he said. So I returned home, keeping my calm mask firmly in place. Claire handed me papers later that evening, her smile almost wicked. Just sign this, Margaret. It's just a routine update for the house, she said sweetly. I took the papers, pretending to read them. Inside I was boiling. The trap was almost ready to close on her. I looked at her and said, "Of course, dear. I'll sign it tomorrow. I need my glasses to see better." Her smile widened. She thought she had me. But that night something unexpected happened. Around midnight, I heard Claire sneaking into my room. I kept my eyes closed as she carefully slipped something under my pillow. My heart raced, but I didn't move. When she left, I pulled it out. It was another document, and this one was far worse than I could have imagined. The paper wasn't just about the house. It was an order to transfer my entire bank account to her name. I gasped, my hands shaking. They were escalating faster than I had anticipated. I knew then that I had to act immediately. The next morning I made a phone call that would change everything. I called Richard and said, "It's time." But just as I was about to leave for his office with the evidence, Claire blocked my way, her arms crossed, a dark smile on her face. "Where do you think you're going, Margaret?" she asked. My heart pounded. She knew. To be continued in the next chapter. If you're hooked already, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The real storm is about to begin, and you won't believe what happens next. Claire's cold eyes stared into mine as if she could see right through me. My fingers tightened around the handle of my purse, where all the evidence I had collected was hidden. For a brief second I thought she might snatch it from me, but instead she smirked and stepped aside. "Don't be late for your little walk, Margaret," she said mockingly. I forced a shaky smile and walked past her. Inside my chest was pounding. She was suspicious, but I couldn't let that stop me. The moment I stepped outside, I quickened my pace and headed straight to Richard's office. My old knees ached with every step, but adrenaline carried me. When I arrived, Richard wasted no time. "We'll file this with the police immediately," he said, placing the documents and recordings into a secure folder. "Margaret, we have to be very careful. If they sense you're on to them, they might become desperate." I nodded, my throat dry. "I know. I'll play along." Over the next few days, I became an actress in my own home. I pretended to be weak, confused, even a little senile. Claire bought it, her confidence growing with every fake smile I returned. She whispered to David constantly, thinking I couldn't hear. They were planning something big, something imminent. Then it happened. One evening, Claire came into my room holding a pen and another set of papers. "Margaret, darling, I know you're tired, so let's just get this over with. Sign here, and I'll take care of everything for you." Her voice was sweet as sugar, but her eyes burned with greed. I took the pen slowly, my hand trembling, not out of fear, but because I wanted her to believe I was too weak to resist. I looked up at her and said, "Of course, Claire. You've been so helpful." I signed the paper with a shaky hand, but it was not my real signature. Richard had advised me to write it in a way that could later be contested. The next morning, Claire and David were gone early. I knew they had gone to the bank to attempt the transfer. What they didn't know was that the police were already waiting there with Richard. My plan was unfolding perfectly. Hours later they returned, faces pale and eyes wide. Claire tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Margaret, what did you do?" I simply smiled. "I don't know what you mean, dear." That night, tension filled the house like thick smoke. I heard them arguing in their room. David's voice was low but furious. "You said this would work. Now the police are involved." Claire snapped back. "Shut up. She's playing games, but she won't win." Their voices faded, but my heart was thundering. They knew they were cornered, and cornered people are dangerous. I had to stay vigilant. The following day, I received a call from Richard. "Margaret, we have enough to press charges, but we need one more undeniable piece of evidence. We need them to openly confess to their plan." Getting them to confess would be risky, but I was willing to take the chance. That evening, I set my small recorder on the kitchen counter where it could capture every word. Then I asked them to join me for tea. When they sat down, I looked at them with feigned sadness. "I know what you're trying to do," I said softly. Claire froze. David shifted nervously. What are you talking about? He asked. I know about the forged documents. I know you want everything I have. Why? My voice trembled, but my eyes locked on theirs. Claire slammed her hand on the table. Because you're old and useless. You're just sitting on a house and money you don't even need. We deserve it. David's face drained of color. Claire, stop. But it was too late. The recorder caught every word. I let out a small sigh and said, "Thank you for telling me the truth." Claire's eyes widened as she realized what had just happened. She lunged for the recorder, but I grabbed it first. "You won't get away with this," she hissed. I stood, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "We'll see about that." That night, I hid the recorder in a safe place and prepared myself for what was to come. But just when I thought I had the upper hand, I woke up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. I stumbled out of my bed, coughing, and saw flames licking the edges of the living room curtains. My heart stopped. Someone had set the house on fire, while I was still inside. To be continued in the next chapter. If this story has kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The fight for survival is only beginning, and what comes next will leave you breathless. The smoke thickened fast, clawing at my throat as I staggered through the hallway. My lungs burned, and my eyes watered so badly I could barely see. The fire crackled louder, hungry, as flames danced across the walls. In the chaos, one thing became clear. This was no accident. Someone had started it. I stumbled toward the front door, coughing violently, only to find it locked from the outside. My heart slammed against my ribs. Panic rose like a wave threatening to drown me. I rushed to the back door, but it too was bolted shut. My hands trembled as I tried every lock, every window, but they were all secured. From outside I heard footsteps. Then Claire's voice, chillingly calm. "Don't worry, Margaret. Just rest. It'll be over soon." Tears streamed down my soot-streaked face. They were trying to kill me. My own daughter-in-law, with my son silently standing by. But they underestimated me. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the kitchen wall, struggling to lift it with my frail arms, but I managed to spray enough to clear a path toward the smallest window in the laundry room. The window was narrow, but desperation gave me strength. I smashed the glass with a metal rod, cutting my hand in the process. Ignoring the pain, I climbed through, my skin scraping against the jagged edges. When I finally fell onto the wet grass outside, I gasped for air like it was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. Coughing, shivering, and shaking, I crawled into the shadows of the backyard. From there I saw them, Claire and David, standing by the gate, watching the flames with cold expressions. They thought I was still inside. They thought their problem was burning away with my home. But as I hid in the darkness, a fire of a different kind lit inside me. They had crossed the line. They had tried to take my life. Now there was no turning back. When they finally left, convinced that I was gone, I called Richard from a neighbor's phone. My voice was hoarse, but my words were firm. "Richard, they tried to kill me. Tonight. They set the house on fire." His silence was heavy. Then came his urgent reply. "Margaret, go to a safe place. I'll arrange protection. This isn't just theft anymore. It's attempted murder." By the time the fire department arrived, most of my home was engulfed in flames. I watched from a distance, hidden under a neighbor's coat. My heart broke seeing decades of memories turn to ashes. But my spirit didn't break. If anything, it hardened. The next morning, the police arrived to question Claire and David. They lied smoothly, saying it must have been an electrical fault, claiming they tried to save me but couldn't find me. I stayed hidden, watching everything unfold. They were convincing, but they didn't know the evidence I had. The recordings, the forged papers, and now their motive for murder. Richard called me later that day. "Margaret, the evidence is solid. But we need to catch them making a direct move against you one more time. The authorities are ready to intervene, but they want it airtight." I agreed. I was willing to lure them into making their final mistake. I told Richard my plan: to return home, to act as though I had survived by sheer luck, and to make them believe I was still vulnerable. He hesitated but ultimately supported me. When I showed up at the charred remains of my house, Claire's face went pale. You survived," she stammered. I smiled faintly. "Yes, dear. God must still have plans for me." The days that followed were tense. They were desperate now, and desperation makes people sloppy. I could see it in their jittery movements, hear it in their whispered arguments. I knew they were planning another attempt, something final. That night, I pretended to take sleeping pills and left the empty bottle by my bedside. Then I lay still, breathing shallowly, as I heard them sneak into my room. Through half-closed eyes, I saw Claire holding a pillow, her hands trembling slightly. She leaned over me, whispering, "This ends tonight." My heart raced, but I didn't move. I let her lower the pillow closer and closer until suddenly, the bedroom door burst open. Police officers stormed in, shouting commands. Claire dropped the pillow, frozen in shock. David tried to run but was tackled to the ground. The officers handcuffed them both as I sat up, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "You said I was too old to matter, Claire. But it looks like I mattered enough to end you." Claire screamed, thrashing against the officers. "This isn't fair. She was supposed to be gone." I looked at her coldly. "Life isn't fair, dear. And neither is justice." As they dragged her out, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and triumph. Sadness that my son had chosen this path, and triumph that I had survived and fought back. But the battle wasn't over yet. The case was going to court, and their lawyer was notorious for twisting the truth. If I lost, everything they tried to steal could still slip away. I knew I had one more card to play, something Claire didn't know about. And when I revealed it in court, it would break her completely. To be continued in the next chapter. This story is heating up, and the real showdown is just around the corner. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You won't believe what happens when I finally reveal my secret weapon. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Curious neighbors, reporters, and even some of Claire's so-called friends filled the benches. The tension was so thick you could almost touch it. I sat in the front row beside Richard, my cane resting against my leg, my back straight despite my age. Claire and David sat across from me, their faces pale but defiant. Claire's eyes locked onto mine, and she smirked like a snake hiding fangs. David, however, couldn't meet my gaze. Deep down, I knew there was still a piece of my son that felt shame, but not enough to stop what he'd done. Their lawyer was slick, speaking with confidence as he tried to paint me as a senile old woman who had misunderstood everything. "Mrs. Johnson is confused," he said to the judge. "She misinterpreted the family's attempts to care for her as malice. There is no proof of any wrongdoing." But then Richard stood, calm and collected. He handed the judge a flash drive. "Your Honor, what you're about to hear is the truth in their own words." The courtroom went silent as the recording played. Claire's voice filled the room. "She's too old to matter anymore. Once she signs the papers, we'll be free of her." Gasps erupted from the audience. Claire's face drained of color. David sank lower into his seat. The judge's eyes hardened. But I wasn't done yet. When the recording ended, I rose slowly, holding on to my cane. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions raging inside me. "This isn't just about property. They tried to burn me alive. They tried to smother me in my sleep. I have lived through many things in my 78 years, but never did I think my own son would plot my death for greed." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Claire started to stammer. "She's lying." "She." Richard raised his hand, cutting her off. "We also have this," he said, handing the judge the fire investigation report. It confirmed that the blaze in my house was no accident. It was caused by accelerants deliberately placed around the living room. Claire's jaw dropped. David looked like he might faint. The judge leaned forward. "This is overwhelming evidence of attempted murder and fraud. The court will recess before my final decision, But let it be clear, this is not looking good for the defendants. As everyone stood to leave, Claire lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage. "You ruined everything, you old witch," she screamed. Officers pulled her back before she could reach me. I looked at her with calm eyes and said softly, "You ruined yourself, Claire." During the recess, Richard pulled me aside. "You did great in there, Margaret. But are you ready for the final part? The thing you told me you were saving for last?" I nodded, my grip on the cane tightening. "Oh, I'm ready." When the court resumed, Richard stood again. "Your Honor, there's one more piece of evidence we need to present. Something that shows not only the defendant's crimes but also the lengths to which Mrs. Johnson went to protect herself." The lights dimmed slightly as a screen lit up. The footage played. The video from the hidden camera I had installed in my bedroom the night they tried to smother me. The entire room watched in horror as Claire crept into my room, pillow in hand, whispering, "This ends tonight." Claire screamed, "That's fake. That's not real." But her voice shook with desperation. The judge banged his gavel. "Enough. This court has seen all it needs to see." The trial concluded with the judge announcing the verdict: guilty on all counts. Claire's tears flowed uncontrollably as she was sentenced to prison. David was given a slightly lesser sentence but still faced years behind bars. My heart broke, but justice had been served. As they were led away in handcuffs, I felt both relief and sadness. I had lost my son to greed, but I had saved myself from their evil. After the sentencing, I thought it was over. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. The very next day, I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single sentence written in shaky handwriting: "This isn't over. You'll regret this." My hands trembled as I read it. Claire was already in prison, so who sent the letter? To be continued in the next chapter. If you're still with me through this storm, don't miss what's coming next. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the danger I thought was over has only just begun. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the letter for what felt like hours. My new house, a small, cozy place provided by a friend until I could rebuild, suddenly felt less like a home and more like a trap. The words on that paper were burned into my mind. This isn't over. You'll regret this. Who could have sent it? Claire and David were behind bars, awaiting transfer to prison. It couldn't have been them. But someone else was working with them. I felt it in my bones. The thought of another unseen enemy made my stomach twist. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside made me jump. I locked all the doors and windows, double-checked them twice, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching me from the shadows. The next morning I called Richard and told him about the letter. His voice was firm. "Margaret, don't panic. Bring it to me. We'll have it analyzed for fingerprints, anything that can link it to someone." I tucked the letter into a plastic bag and drove to his office. On the way, I noticed a black car following me for several blocks. My heart pounded as I turned down side streets, but it stayed behind me. Only when I pulled into a crowded gas station did it finally speed off. When I handed the letter to Richard, he frowned. "This is a threat, Margaret. Whoever wrote this is either trying to scare you or finish what Claire started." Fear clawed at my chest, but I straightened my back. Let them try. I'm not the same woman they thought they could destroy. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. I'd come home to find my door unlocked when I was sure I had locked it. My curtains would be slightly drawn back. Once, I found muddy footprints on my porch though it hadn't rained. Someone was getting close. One evening while preparing tea, I heard something shatter in the living room. I grabbed my cane, heart thundering, and tiptoed toward the noise. The window was cracked open, the breeze fluttering the curtains. On the floor lay a brick wrapped in paper. I picked it up with shaking hands and unwrapped the note tied to it. "Leave town or you won't survive the next time." My breath came in short gasps. This was escalating. They wanted me gone, but I wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, I went to the police with the brick and the letter. They promised to increase patrols around my house, but I could tell they didn't take it as seriously as they should. "Probably just some kids," one officer said with a shrug. "Kids don't follow an old woman for miles. Kids don't threaten to kill." That night I decided to set up my own trap. I borrowed a small security camera from a neighbor and placed it facing my driveway. I positioned another one inside the hallway. If someone came for me, I'd have proof. Hours crawled by. Around midnight, I heard footsteps crunching on gravel outside. I peeked through the blinds, my heart hammering. A shadow moved near the carport. I clutched my cane tightly, praying the cameras were catching everything. The shadow crept closer to my front door. I heard a faint scratching sound. Someone was trying to pick the lock. My throat went dry. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. Then, suddenly, the porch light I had set to motion sensor switched on, flooding the area with light. The figure froze for a second, then bolted into the darkness. The next morning I reviewed the footage. My hands trembled as I watched the screen. The figure was tall, wearing a hoodie, but when they turned slightly, the camera caught part of their face. Gasp. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't David. It was a man I had never seen before. I took the footage to Richard, who showed it to the police. This time they were alarmed. "We'll run this through our system," an officer promised. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the dimly lit living room, my phone rang. The voice on the other end was low, almost a growl. "You think prison stops us? You think you can win? This is just the beginning." I froze, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Who is this?" I demanded. The line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. But instead of fear, something else coursed through me. Determination. They thought they could scare me into silence, into running. They were wrong. The next day the police called. "Mrs. Johnson," the officer said, "we identified the man in the footage. He's someone with a criminal record, hired muscle. And you won't believe who hired him." My chest tightened. "Who?" I asked, barely breathing. The officer hesitated. "We have reason to believe he's being paid by someone outside prison, a relative of Claire's. Someone very dangerous." Before I could respond, I heard the sound of glass breaking behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat. Someone was inside my house. To be continued in the next chapter. This fight is far from over. Don't miss what happens next. Like, comment, and subscribe because the danger creeping closer to me is about to explode into something no one expected. The sound of shattering glass froze me in place. My heart pounded in my chest as I gripped my cane tightly. I could hear footsteps crunching over the broken pieces, slow and deliberate, like whoever was inside wanted me to know they were there. Every instinct screamed at me to hide, but I wasn't going to let them trap me like some frightened animal. I moved silently into the kitchen and grabbed the heaviest pan I could find. My hands trembled, but my grip was firm. The footsteps grew louder. Then, a voice slithered through the darkness. "You're making this harder than it has to be, old lady." The hairs on my arms stood up. I stayed crouched behind the kitchen island, my breathing shallow. When the shadowy figure stepped into the light, my heart nearly stopped. It was the same man from the security footage. Tall, scarred, eyes cold as ice. He scanned the room, holding a crowbar. "I know you're here," he hissed. "You can't hide from us forever." I tightened my grip on the pan and whispered to myself, "You're stronger than this, Margaret. You've survived worse." When he rounded the corner, I swung with all my strength. The pan struck his arm and he cursed loudly, dropping the crowbar. I ran for the front door, but he caught my sleeve, yanking me back. Pain shot through my shoulder. I screamed, struggling against his grip. Just then, flashing blue lights flooded the windows. The sirens blared, and within seconds, the door burst open. Police officers stormed in, tackling the man to the ground. He fought viciously, but they pinned him down and cuffed him. "Are you hurt, Mrs. Johnson?" one officer asked, helping me to my feet. I was shaking but alive. "I'm fine," I croaked. "Thank you." The man glared at me as they dragged him out, spitting. "You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming." The officers escorted him away, but his words lingered like a venomous echo in my mind. The police later confirmed he was working for Claire's older brother, a man with a violent history and ties to criminal circles. Apparently, he blamed me for Claire's downfall and swore to finish what she started. Richard came to see me the next morning. He looked at me with a mix of concern and admiration. "Margaret, they won't stop until they're put away for good. We need to take this further. Expose everything they're tied to." I agreed. I was done living in fear. It was time to turn their own darkness against them. Over the following week, Richard and I worked tirelessly with the police. The man who broke into my house cut a deal in exchange for a lighter sentence. He spilled everything: names, locations, plans. It turned out Claire's brother was not only orchestrating the attacks but also planning to seize my assets through fraudulent legal maneuvers while intimidating me into submission. Armed with this information, the police prepared a sting operation. They needed me to lure him out, to make him believe his threats were working and that I was ready to negotiate. It was dangerous, but I agreed. 2 nights later, I sat alone in a diner on the edge of town, my cane beside me, a small recorder hidden in my pocket. I stirred my coffee slowly, pretending to be nervous. Across the room, undercover officers blended in as ordinary customers. The door opened and he walked in, a tall, menacing man with a cruel smirk. He sat across from me, his presence suffocating. "Smart of you to call me," he said. "Maybe you're not as stubborn as I thought." I looked him in the eye, my voice calm. "I just want this to end." He leaned forward. "Sign over everything to me, and maybe you'll live long enough to see the sunrise." My recorder captured every word. I gave him a shaky nod, sliding a fake document across the table. He grabbed it, smirking, but before he could say another word, the undercover officers surrounded him. Guns drawn, they shouted, "Freeze!" He reached for his pocket, but they tackled him to the ground. The diner erupted in chaos as they cuffed him. I sat still, my heart pounding, watching as he was dragged away. One officer turned to me and said, "It's over, Mrs. Johnson." But deep down I knew it wasn't. Claire's trial had already broken her, but now her family would come after me with everything they had left. And as if to confirm my fear, that very night I received another call, this time from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice whispered, "You think you've won, Margaret? You haven't seen the worst of us yet." Before I could respond, the line went dead. My blood ran cold. To be continued in the next chapter. If this story has you gripping your seat, don't miss what's coming next. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the final storm is about to hit harder than ever, and what's waiting for me will leave everyone in tears. The call echoed in my ears long after the line went dead. The voice was unfamiliar, but the threat was clear. They weren't done with me. My hands shook as I placed the phone back on the table. I had thought this nightmare was nearing its end, but now it was spiraling into something darker. I barely slept that night. Every shadow in my room seemed to move. Every small sound made my heart race. But fear wasn't going to stop me anymore. They wanted me to be weak, to cower in a corner until they crushed me. I had survived fire, betrayal, and attempted murder. I wasn't backing down. The next morning, Richard called with an update. "Margaret, the woman who threatened you is most likely Claire's cousin, Vanessa. She's known to be manipulative and dangerous, just like Claire. We've already put surveillance on her, but she's slippery. This isn't going to be easy." I closed my eyes, sighing. "Tell me what I need to do." Over the next few days, the tension grew thicker. I noticed strange cars parked near my house. Neighbors reported seeing a woman in a black coat hanging around the area. My phone kept ringing from unknown numbers, sometimes with silence on the other end, sometimes with whispered threats. One night, as I sat by the fireplace, the power suddenly went out. The room plunged into darkness. My breath caught in my throat. The only light came from the dim glow of the dying fire. Then I heard the creak of the front door. Slowly, I reached for the panic button the police had given me. My fingers trembled, but I pressed it. A silent alarm was sent to the authorities. Moments later, the silhouette of a woman appeared in the doorway. She stepped into the light of the fire, and I saw her face. Sharp features, cold eyes, and a wicked smile. "Vanessa, you ruined my family," she spat. "Claire is rotting in prison because of you. David's life is over. And you're still here, acting like some kind of hero." My voice was surprisingly steady. "Your family destroyed themselves. I just refused to let them destroy me too." She snarled and pulled out a knife, the blade glinting in the firelight. My heart pounded, but I didn't move. She stepped closer. "You're going to regret ever crossing us, old woman." Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Vanessa cursed under her breath and lunged at me, but before she could reach me, the door burst open. Police officers swarmed in, tackling her to the ground. The knife clattered across the floor. As they dragged her away screaming, she spat out one last threat. "This isn't over, Margaret. You'll pay." I stood there shaking, gripping my cane so hard my knuckles ached. One officer placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're safe now, ma'am. She won't be getting out anytime soon." But I wasn't convinced. People like her, like Claire, didn't stop. They would keep trying until they were completely broken. Over the next week, things began to quiet down. Vanessa was in custody. The threats stopped. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. But the peace didn't last long. One afternoon, I was in the garden watering my plants when a car pulled up to the curb. A man in a suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. He walked up to me with a polite smile. "Mrs. Johnson." "Yes," I said cautiously. He handed me an envelope. "You've been served. Claire is filing an appeal. She claims she was coerced, that the evidence against her was fabricated. She's trying to overturn her sentence." My hands tightened around the envelope. I could barely contain my anger. "She's still playing games," I muttered. The man nodded sympathetically. "Be ready. The court will reopen the case soon." I went inside and opened the envelope. Inside was the notice of appeal and, chillingly, a handwritten note from Claire herself. "You might have won the first round, but this isn't the end. I'll see you in court, and this time I'll win." My knees weakened, but my resolve strengthened. I wasn't afraid anymore. If she wanted another battle, she'd get one. And this time I was going to crush every last piece of her lies. That night, as I prepared my evidence and called Richard, I made myself a promise. No matter how many battles they started, I would finish them. But just as I hung up the phone, a rock smashed through my window with another note tied to it. "You won't live to see the trial. To be continued in the next chapter. The storm is reaching its peak, and the final showdown is near. Don't miss what happens next. Like, comment, and subscribe because the endgame is going to leave you speechless." The shattered glass crunched under my slippers as I stepped cautiously toward the broken window. My heart raced, my breath uneven. The night outside was quiet. Too quiet. Whoever threw that rock had disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the chilling message behind. "You won't live to see the trial." I tightened my robe around me and picked up the note with trembling hands. The handwriting was jagged and rushed, different from the previous threats. This wasn't just intimidation. It was desperation. They were running out of options, and that made them dangerous. I called the police immediately. Within minutes, officers were at my door, inspecting the scene. "Mrs. Johnson," one of them said, "this is escalating again. We're putting a patrol outside your house until the trial. Stay inside, keep your doors locked, and if anything happens, call us." I nodded, but my thoughts were spinning. Claire was in prison. Vanessa was behind bars. This had to be someone else. Someone who still had loyalty to them or something to gain from my destruction. The following days were tense. I barely slept, listening to every sound at night. The patrol car outside gave me some comfort, but fear still crept in like an unwelcome guest. At the same time, I began gathering everything I could for the upcoming trial. Documents, recordings, photos, the security footage. Everything that showed the truth. Richard called me daily to reassure me. "Margaret, we're going to win this. Claire's appeal is weak. The evidence against her is overwhelming." But I knew better. Claire was manipulative. She had probably concocted some sob story to gain sympathy. People like her always had another trick up their sleeve. The day of the trial arrived sooner than I expected. I dressed in my best navy blue suit, the one my late husband always said made me look strong. As I entered the courthouse, whispers followed me. Everyone knew my story by now. Some looked at me with pity, others with admiration. Claire was brought in wearing her prison uniform, but her eyes still burned with arrogance. She smirked at me like she had already won. I stared back, refusing to show any fear. The proceedings began. Her lawyer spun a web of lies, claiming I had framed her, that the recordings were altered, that I was mentally unstable and paranoid. He even brought in a so-called expert to testify that the audio could have been tampered with. My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. When it was our turn, Richard played the original recordings, presented the forensic reports, and called the fire investigator to testify. The evidence was solid. Still, Claire remained smug, as if she had one last ace hidden up her sleeve. And she did. During the recess, Richard pulled me aside. "Margaret, we've just been informed that someone tried to tamper with the court's evidence storage. They failed, but this means someone from the outside is still working for her." My stomach dropped. Who could it be? He shook his head. "We don't know yet. But it's clear they're desperate." When the court reconvened, I took the stand. My voice trembled at first, but then it grew stronger as I told my story. How I had loved my son, welcomed Claire, and nearly lost everything because of their greed. I described the fire, the attempted smothering, the break-ins, the threats. By the time I finished, there were tears in the eyes of several jurors. Claire's face twisted with fury. She jumped to her feet, shouting, "She's lying! She's lying about everything." The judge banged the gavel, ordering her to sit down, but her outburst had already damaged her case. Just when it seemed the tide was turning in my favor, something shocking happened. A commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. The doors burst open and a man stormed in, bloodied, bruised, and shouting, "I have proof! Claire tried to have me killed because I knew too much." Gasps filled the room. The man collapsed to his knees, handing the judge a flash drive. He claimed he had been working with Claire's brother but had decided to come clean after they turned on him. The judge allowed the evidence to be played. On the screen, a hidden camera recording appeared. Vanessa and Claire's brother plotting how to silence witnesses and even discussing bribing someone inside the courthouse. Claire's face drained of color as the room erupted in murmurs. Richard leaned over to me and whispered, This seals it." Claire's lawyer slumped in his chair, knowing it was over. The judge called for order and announced that a final verdict would be delivered the next morning. As Claire was dragged out of the courtroom, she screamed at me, "You think you've won, Margaret? Tomorrow isn't going to save you. You'll never be safe." The officers restrained her, but her words chilled me. Because that night, as I prepared for the final day in court, I noticed something terrifying. The patrol car that was supposed to be outside my house was gone. The street was empty. My phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. "No one's coming to save you tonight. To be continued in the next chapter." We're heading into the explosive finale. Don't miss how it all ends. Like, comment, and subscribe because the conclusion will leave you breathless and in tears. The message glowed on my phone screen, and for a moment the room spun around me. My fingers trembled as I read it again. "No one's coming to save you tonight." The empty street outside felt like a death sentence. Whoever sent that message wanted me to know I was alone. I locked every door and window, sliding heavy furniture in front of them. My heart thudded in my ears, but my mind stayed sharp. I grabbed the small revolver I had kept hidden in a drawer for years, one my husband had insisted I hold on to, just in case. Tonight it wasn't just a precaution, it was my lifeline. The night stretched endlessly. The house so silent I could hear the ticking of the clock. Around midnight I heard it. Footsteps outside, crunching slowly on gravel. My grip tightened on the revolver. The footsteps stopped right by my window. A shadow moved across the curtains. Suddenly, the window shattered, and a man climbed through. His face was covered, but his stance was aggressive. "You should have stayed quiet, old lady," he growled, stepping toward me with a knife glinting in his hand. I raised the gun, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my throat. "Take one more step, and it'll be your last." He hesitated, sneering. "You won't shoot." But he was wrong. As he lunged forward, I fired. The sound roared through the house, and he collapsed to the floor, screaming in pain as the bullet tore through his leg. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the metallic scent of blood. My hands shook, but I kept the gun pointed at him. "Who sent you?" I demanded. Through gritted teeth he spat. "Vanessa," she said, "finish you before court." Before I could respond, red and blue lights flooded the windows. The police stormed in, weapons drawn. They tackled the man, cuffing him as he howled in pain. One officer turned to me, wide-eyed. "Mrs. Johnson, are you hurt?" I shook my head, lowering the gun. "No. But I'm done being afraid." The man was taken away, and I spent the rest of the night under police protection. When dawn broke, I put on my suit and prepared for the final battle in court. I wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting to end this nightmare once and for all. The courtroom was silent when I walked in. Claire sat there, pale but still trying to look defiant. Vanessa was brought in wearing cuffs, her face twisted with rage. The man I shot was also present under heavy guard, ready to testify. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. The new evidence was damning. The testimony from the injured hitman, the recordings from Vanessa's phone that police had retrieved overnight, and the threats I had received. Everything painted a clear picture. This wasn't just an appeal, it was a criminal empire crumbling under its own weight. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My voice cracked at first, but then it grew stronger, filling the courtroom. They said I was too old to matter. They thought they could break me, scare me, kill me. But here I stand. I survived because I refused to let evil win. And today, I ask this court to make sure they never hurt anyone again. The judge looked directly at Claire and Vanessa. "You two have shown nothing but malice and disregard for human life. This court sentences you to the maximum penalty allowed by law. There will be no more appeals." Claire's face crumpled as she screamed. "No. This isn't fair. You can't do this to me." Vanessa cursed and tried to lunge at me, but officers restrained her. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the gavel came down, sealing their fate. As they were dragged away, I felt tears stream down my cheeks, not of sadness but of relief. Justice had finally been served. When I walked out of that courtroom, the sunlight hit my face, warm and bright. Richard smiled at me. "It's over, Margaret. You did it." I looked up at the sky, whispering to myself, "I did it, George. I survived." The next weeks were quiet. I rebuilt my home, surrounded by neighbors who now looked at me with admiration instead of pity. The nightmares slowly faded, replaced by peace I hadn't felt in years. One evening, as I sipped tea on my porch, a young woman from the neighborhood approached. "Mrs. Johnson, we've all been following your story. You're an inspiration." I smiled, my eyes misty. "Thank you, dear. Always remember. Never let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. 'Cause you do. We all do." For the first time in months, I felt truly free. And to everyone who has followed my journey through this storm, thank you. If my story touched your heart and reminded you that age is never a weakness, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support matters more than you know.